Back to KTN News Diary. Let's continue with our coverage. And NARC Kenya leader was also the Azimio leader Raila Odinga's running mate in the 2022 elections was this morning. That's Martha Karua was this morning hosted at our sister station Spice FM to, address some of the issues, including Azimio's game plan on how it plans to address the cost of living, among other issues affecting the country. Let's listen in.
So Martha Karua is the NARC Kenya party leader, is an Azimio leader. Good morning, Martha.
Morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation again.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a while.
Yes, it's been.
But good to have you here. We're going to have various conversations, about what the Azimio strategy has been. We know about Sabasaba, and we saw what happened in Sabasaba. We know about the signature drive. We have questions about that just to understand what the strategy is. But before we do that, CT has the day's proverb.
Our proverb the proverbs for the whole of this week come from the country of Sudan. Northern Sudan.
Khartoum, Sudan.
Khartoum, Sudan.
Okay.
Yes. When the ancient Egyptians and the Arabs referred to northern Sudan as Kush, I am told that the Arabic translation of it was land of the black people.
And indeed they are.
Yes. Kenyans think they are black. They have no clue. There are some genuinely black people, as in they are dark to a fault. But of interest is how a civilization that was once heralded as one of the biggest and the most advanced civilizations on the planet, upon attaining independence, what has characterized the country is civil strife after civil strife. A revolution followed by a coup within a very short time, a revolution followed by a coup. And their leadership has always been, yes, there's somebody who heads a council, but a revolutionary council with somebody emerging as a leader until this current strife. In fact, most people assume that the strife they're undergoing is the first one. Fourth. So, the proverb for the day. Hot water is not a playground for frogs.
Hot water is not a playground for frogs. Martha, what's your interpretation of this one?
Wishmo smiles.
I think many interpretations. If we were to take ourselves as the frogs, as human beings, then hot water would equally not be our playground. And there are situations that are like hot water.
It's not our playground.
No.
So we better be careful.
Very.
Straight into the conversation then, Martha. On Friday, the leadership of Azimio had called for nationwide protests to come out and send a message to the government on taxation, on other issues. And this is rallying. One of the things was a rallying call for a boycott of taxes, among others. We saw what happened. We saw what happened in Nairobi. We saw what happened across the country. Overall, when you sat back at the end of the day as the leaders of Azimio, how did you score the day? Did you succeed? Was it successful?
It was highly successful. What I can say is that this civil action was devolved. This is the beginning of devolution of civil action or people's action. And the way the propaganda of the Ruto regime has been is like the demonstrations are an affair for our leader, Raila, and his people. But Friday proved that wrong. We had very vibrant demonstrations in Kisii, and there was no Azimio top leadership. It's the people's action. The same with Mombasa. And you saw in various other parts of the country, in Nairobi, in Kirinyaga, I launched the collection of signatures in a town hall meeting, which was very well attended. And there were various actions. You saw Kalonzo in Kadhiani, in Machakos. And there are many, many other places. And the response of the people was very good. Demonstrations were peaceful until police took violence to the demonstrations. In Mombasa, the police had even publicly assured them that they would facilitate, meaning overseeing peace. But they are the ones, unprovoked, who attacked the demonstrators. The same in Nairobi, as they were marching to the city center. And it's not an offense to come to the city center. They were just expressing. And in a way, Nairobi was able to show that people are there. Every day we are facing these questions from the media and from detractors that, oh, how many people? I invite them to count how many people marched from Kamukunji towards the city center. And that's just a tip of the iceberg. That's the way it's been wherever we go in Nairobi. Whether it is that Kawangware route we did the other day, whether it is Kibra, whether it is Mathare, whether it is Embakasi, that is the signature. And even when we had countrywide rallies, that was the signature. And I think it is time. We've started with that proverb. Let's all agree that hot water is not a playground for frogs. You see, we may wonder why Khartoum's Sudan has had 4 upheavals. It's about people exercising power for themselves, not for the people. Because if it is for the people, then when people speak, you pause and listen. So my message to the Ruto illegitimate regime is listen to the voices of the people.
What was the message on Friday? When you were in Kiruguya, in Kirinyaga County, when the others were across the country, what was the message for the Sabasaba? Was there one coherent message?
Yes,
message?
I was in Difathas, which is on the borderline of Gishugu and Mwea, just a place where everybody could meet.
Why is it called Difathas, by the way?
Because there was a chief known as Difathas. So Difatha, so it becomes Difathas. We have Kutus. There was a chief called Goto. The white man could not say Goto. So he said Kutus, it became Kutus. We also have Jegas, where we had Chief Jega. So it's of names and people.
Okay.
So we were at the fathers, and the message was consistent. We've been telling Kenyans, look, you have power. Article 1 says sovereignty resides with the citizens of Kenya. That's a constant message. And we are telling the people they cannot exercise that sovereignty either through elected representatives or directly. Since the elected representatives have refused or are tone deaf, a majority of them, to the people's cries and needs, it is time to exercise that sovereignty directly. Since there is no place enough to hold a general meeting of the Kenyan public, we will hold as many meetings all over the country. And how then can Kenyans express themselves, and how can those who ask, but how many are you, know how many we are? So the people will hold their own referendum of signatures, so that by the time we hit the threshold of 10 million, then we know a majority of Kenyans are speaking. So that those signatures are people exercising their will directly, their sovereignty directly. They are not for taking to any institution. It's literally a body count of the people who are supporting the cause.
Do you see this position as one that is used as a conduit through which the voice of the people will be really heard, or is it an Azimio voice? And I think that's the question. Are we talking about Kenyans saying something and using this platform to express that, or is it still the grievances that Azimio has?
The grievances of Azimio are Wanjiko's grievances. From day one, we have talked about cost of living. The Ruto regime has shown Kenyans the contempt card. Cost of living was bad when we started. End of year, last year, early this year. It has been exacerbated by the measures taken in the finance bill. That's a contempt card. And I think this is hitting everybody where it hurts most: on your plate, on your sick bed, on education, on transport, on virtually everything. That cannot be an Azimio, a Raila or Karua problem, or Kalonzo if you like. It is a problem that is hitting everybody where they are. It's actually economic violence on the people of Kenya. The second issue about electoral justice, and that's why we were demanding the servers to be open. When elections are manipulated, it is the voice of the people that is being trashed. It is so much a people issue. There is a reason why people make choices to elect, because they have hopes that their aspirations, their needs will be looked after by their representatives. You can see the sorry situation we are in as a direct consequence of trashing the people's voice. So that issue is a people's issue as well. And it's the same as appointment of IEBC commissioners. Is it a William Ruto commission? Is it a Kenya Kwanza commission? Or is it a Kenyan commission? You don't abuse the position you have usurped or sat on by whatever means to make a personal commission. That's what we are saying. When it comes to the fourth issue, respecting multi-party democracy, and our constitution proudly states Kenya shall be a multi-party democracy. When you start buying off elected members to cross over to your side or to vote with you without doing what is right, because members are not tied, they can cross the floor, but the consequence is that you go back to the voters. So when you start abusing and what shall I say, undermining multi-party democracy, again you are trashing the voice of the people. That constitution we made is the people's, if you like, covenant with those entrusted with the leadership. So when you abuse it, you abuse the people. All those are people issues, and that's why they resonate with the people. And the issue of the day is firstly the cost of living. Yeah.
You know, this message, and that's what I was asking about messaging, it appears it had gotten to a point where it concretized into a message that had been broken down into the four issues that you've said.
Yeah.
Before it came to the four issues, there are very many issues as you're going around the country with the town halls.
Yeah.
And at that point, you said we were listening to the people so we can get the issues. You came with the four issues as Azimio. And when the president then said, let us sit down and have some bipartisan talks, it was clear what Azimio was taking to the table. These are the four issues. Since then, those issues appear now to have taken a backseat when it comes to the issue of tax. And I'm using this in reference to the calls for Friday's demonstrations.
Yeah.
In the run-up to Friday's demonstrations, it was not about these four issues. It was about now civil disobedience when it comes to tax. And we said, this is a call for tax boycott. We have moved the messaging from cost of living, from IEBC, from multipartyism and all. We are saying now, let us walk to work, let us carpool, let us do this and the other. But come Friday, you are not carpooling. You are not walking to the demonstrations. You're not using public means, like encouraging us to use public means and cram ourselves into PSVs, and in fact, we even load ourselves into double the capacity of PSVs. You, the leaders, are still driving in your big vehicles, and you know what that publicly means. So people get confused with what exactly is the Azimio message every time they call us out to demonstrate.
I think there's something you're missing.
What's that?
The finance bill is about cost of living. And I have just said that the issue number one. So when we are talking about tax boycott, it's all about cost of living. You cannot, at this time, when people are so economically battered, start raising taxation. You forget to raise the pay. you raise taxation to a person who is already unable to afford 3 meals a day for themselves and their families, to a person who has already fallen in arrears on fees. And on top of the usual taxation pay as you earn, you are now imposing a taxation for housing in quotes. We don't know whose houses, because for some of these low earners, and they are the majority, they would have to take close to 70 years to merit a house, say, of 2 million shillings. So what housing are you taxing them? A housing fund which is not for them, and which they have not identified as a priority. Remember, the Constitution also gives us the right for public participation.
True.
Where did people say that they wanted houses? People have spoken. The media has done polling, the various media houses, and over 90% didn't want that taxes. So you are imposing a punitive and oppressive tax to an already battered population. You are raising the taxation on fuel from 8 to 16%, making transportation and having a ripple effect which makes everything else go up, including food, on people who cannot afford a meal a day. Because there are some households that are going without a meal. So it is unconscionable. Taxation must look at the situation of the person being taxed. And if you look at our Constitution, Article 43, social and economic rights, it's the responsibility of the state to ensure that people have adequate food. That means that those who cannot afford, the state has to step in. Health, it's also an issue the state must take up. Water, housing, and also education.
So housing
among
is there.
Other. Housing, what that means is that you have programs that provide housing. Housing has been on the table ever since the Kibaki government came in. It was taken a step further, and you remember during the Kibaki government, the Kibra houses were done. During Uhuru's tenure, and I'll call it Uhuruto because both of them were there, houses were done in Nairobi and Mombasa. Houses have been done all the time, but people have not been forcefully
made to
tax.
for it.
Actually, literally removing food on the plates of the most oppressed. You exempt helicopter owners from taxation on parts, but you remove food subsidies. In a country where the Constitution tells you that you have to ensure that nobody stays without the basic needs. So we are saying our message has not moved. The call to action, the call to action is diverse actions from tax boycott. You asked why we are not working. I always carpool. In fact, there are meetings we have appeared in one car with Eugene at times, with other people. Carpooling is not a new thing to us. Even to do the things we do, we have to cut costs of how we operate. So we are not telling people things we have not done. So we carpool.
When you say, let's have a tax boycott, how exactly do we boycott these taxes? How do we not pay the housing fund, housing levy? How do we not pay the extra 8% VAT on fuel? How do we not pay excise on airtime and the rest? How do we boycott these taxes?
Tax avoidance is not an offense. So you can find innovative ways. Like buying from a mama boga means you're not paying the 16% VAT. So you can avoid taxation anywhere where you can avoid it. Buy less fuel by carpooling. And I'm saying carpooling is something we already practice. It doesn't mean that I'll now park my car and start using a matatu. If I have to, I will. But there are other innovative ways, carpooling with friends, minimizing the places you go to, all those things. We are not talking of things that are not practical. and asking the matatu
So it's
people.
what you're basically saying is let's cut our costs.
Cut our costs and avoid.
It's not a tax boycott.
It's a tax boycott.
If I cut my costs, Martha, that's
Yeah.
not necessarily a tax boycott. You're basically just telling me, you know what, Eric, times are tough, so adjust your life. Adjust your life, go to a lower house so that now the amount of rent that you pay that goes into the housing tax is less in terms of rental income is less. Take up a pay cut so that the amount of money that you then deducted in terms of 1.5% of your income. That is me adjusting my livelihood.
No,
Martha,
it's also
tax.
about those who can will boycott. Remember, not everybody is even in the mainstream of paying taxes. So you find ways to avoid giving this illegitimate regime the money they are so hungry for. And you can see already through the court, the stay has given Kenyans relief, even if just for a few days, because the taxation that applies today is the taxation of yesterday. And it appears that those in the illegitimate regime are sometimes not well schooled, because they were saying that they will now not get taxes, which is not true. They are getting, but at last year's rate. What was stopped is the rise. And there are many, many other places where people are being forced to pay more. Look at the people earning 500,000 and above. How much they're being raided. Remember, these are salaries you've already committed either to a mortgage, to this, your children are in a more expensive school. This taxation is not an Azimio issue. It's hitting everybody where it hurts most.
Martha, I know we're going to go to a break in a minute, but I just have to ask, if we're looking at a tax boycott, what would it achieve then on the side of government? What would that achieve? Leave creative ways of how people can actually get this done, but then in terms of sorting out this issue at whatever level, what would that achieve?
Just, making them get less money because they have refused to listen to Kenyans. They are making life more difficult. They ought to be denied that which they are seeking.